Translation. My dear beloved wife, daughter of Sukracharya, in this world there was someone exactly like me. Please listen as I narrate the history of his life. By hearing about the life of such a householder, those who have retired from householder life always lament. Please repeat. My dear beloved wife, daughter of Sukracharya, in this world there was someone exactly like me. Please listen as I narrate the history of his life. By hearing about the life of such a householder, those who have retired from householder life always lament. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Persons who live in the village or town are called Grama Nivasi, and those who live in the forest are called Vanavasi or Vanaprastha. The Vanaprasthas who have retired from family life generally lament about their past family because it engaged them in trying to fulfill lusty desires. Prahlad Maharaj said that one should retire from family life as soon as possible, and he described family life as the darkest well. Hitvatmapatam griha andakupam. If one continuously or permanently concentrates on living with his family, he should be understood to be killing himself. In the Vedic civilization, therefore, it is recommended that one retire from family life at the end of his 50th year and go to the Vana, the forest. When he becomes expert or accustomed to forest life, or retired as a Vanaprastha, he should accept sannyas. Vanam gato yad thiram ashrayeta. Sannyas means accepting unalloyed engagement in the service of the Lord. Vedic civilization therefore recommends 4 different stages of life: brahmacharya, grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyas. One should be very much ashamed of remaining a householder and not promoting oneself to the 2 higher stages, namely vanaprastha and sannyas. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurinmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivashari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. My dearly beloved wife, daughter of Sukracharya, in this world there was someone exactly like me. Please listen as I narrate the history of his life. By hearing about the life of such a householder, those who have retired from householder life always lament. Yet Shankaracharya says, Balam tasya yuvam, someone knows, yuvam asyati juvatarya vridha chintanam. Yes, that those who are vridha, they always lament. Parame kalpane kopina lagno, and no one is inquiring about Brahman, no one is inquiring about the absolute truth. Young people, bala, they just play, spend their life playing. When they become a little older, then they become enamored. When they get old, vridha, then they just lament. Well, if they're wise, they lament that they wasted their life, and if they continue to remain foolish, then they just lament, oh, I had such a good time when I was young, now I'm old, now I can't enjoy like that, it's all over. Parame brahmani kalpina lagno, and no one's interested in self-realization. So he was lamenting like that. Anyway, quite interesting, this whole story, this whole pastime, aside from how someone can actually gift his youth to someone else, quite a mystic feat, how such a thing would happen. Puru gives his youth and virility to his father. But in any case, as here we see in Srimad Bhagavatam, the history, Yayati is also saying, well, there was someone like me. In other words, the someone is actually not just a goat, but we're more or less all in the same situation as Maharaj Yayati, in that we've sort of fallen into this material world, and due to this real overwhelming desire to be like Krishna, to enjoy. Krishna bahimukya hona bhogya vanchakare. In Prabhupada's 1977 conversations, there's a discussion, which is not the first time Prabhupada has that discussion, where devotees are talking. This is sometime in January. Devotees are talking about how people accuse Krishna of being lusty. Now, generally, Prabhupada is he's very direct about the answer, but he gives answers like, you're the one who's lusty, because actually everyone is Krishna's wife, or everyone belongs to Krishna anyway. But this is the first time, at least, that I've heard Prabhupada really takes a completely different tact, and he says, sex? Of course, where do you think sex comes from? Of course sex is in God. Otherwise, how would you have it if it doesn't come from Him? And then Prabhupada goes along this track, and you can hear devotees are a little surprised, a little shocked. And Prabhupada unpackages everything, Janmadya Sujataha, everything comes from God. So of course there's sex life. But his sex is pure and your sex is impure. Because everything that he does is pure. And Prabhupada doesn't mince his words, he just keeps repeating it over again. And he elaborates further on that. Krishna Bahimukha, it exists. It exists in the spiritual world. It exists here in the material world, but what we have here is very much a different version of that original Adiras. And in the commentaries generally to those 5 chapters of Srimad Bhagavatam that deal with the rasa, acharyas go into extreme depth philosophically to actually explain, for instance, the fact that our enjoyment is based on sense gratification. Our enjoyment here in terms of actually sex life is based on sense gratification. Krishna's is not based on sense gratification. It's based on actually an exchange of love, and therefore the whole idea of lust isn't actually present. Anyway, let's not go too deeply into that. But Yayati means all of us, so just as Yayati gives the example of a goat, similarly, Maharaj Yayati is, in one sense, an example of how. And generally, here Bhagavatam takes the men's approach, but obviously, where there's men, there's also women. And where was it? Yes, Yayati was very much attached to women, and Srila Prabhupada makes this introductory. Are these introductories by Prabhupada? Did we have this in earlier on, these introductory parts to the Bhagavatam, to the chapters? They seem to have come later, didn't they? Anyone remembers? Anyway, how Prabhupada said that every man can become bewildered by a beautiful woman, and since we're talking about goats, often women become scapegoats for the miseries of men. Sometimes in my experiences in Krishna consciousness, what to speak of what goes on in the rest of the world, I think this world would be such a peaceful place without any men. Isn't it? Don't you agree? Just like in our society, probably 99% of the problems were caused by men, not women. But anyway, we have to have both of them, even though men are such troublemakers. And hopefully they're intelligent enough to also rectify themselves. And we see that that's the situation here, is that ultimately, as we'll see later in the chapter, King Yayati, despite whatever his past was, and is a pretty erotic past, he attains liberation. And that's why, later on, even then, Krishna will be called a Jadu. In Vaishnav sadachar or proper conduct, looking at a Vaishnav's past is considered to be actually an offense. Arche Vishnu Shiladir Gurumasi Vaishnava Jati Buddhi. Don't look at a Vaishnav's birth, and birth means don't look at what happened afterwards. The important thing is, what is someone now? And what can someone be in the future? Well, that also we cannot predict. But especially if we see that someone is glorious by dint of having taken to Krishna consciousness and is rendering service, then we should not look at a Vaishnava's past. So the important thing is that after all of this mess of being in this world, Yayati achieves liberation, and that's the opportunity that's also given for us. And here in the purport, Prabhupada is then emphasizing one aspect of the process or the path by which one becomes liberated, and that is the Vanaprastha ashram, which is amongst all of the ashrams in our society, the least existent, the least defined. We've got brahmacharis are quite well sort of clear what they're meant to do. Grihastas also, more or less by trial and error. Sannyasis, similarly, and Vanaprastha is not really so much there. But Prabhupada is giving, and this last line was his last sentence was quite emphatic. One should be very much ashamed of remaining a householder and not promoting oneself to the two higher stages, namely Vanaprastha and Sannyas. Now, of course, when you read the Vanaprastha version of Narada Muni earlier on in the 7th canto, it's pretty horrendous. Forget about Grihastas doing it. I wouldn't even advise sannyasis to try and do it. It's extremely austere. Although Narad says at least a Vanaprastha should do it 1 to 12 years, but it means going out in the forest. Let your hair grow, don't brush your teeth, don't bathe, wear bark or deer skin. You can't eat any type of grains that come from an agricultural field, just things that grow naturally, in other words, wild rice, or preferably just fruits that go on a tree, nothing that's cooked. I don't know what you do with wild rice if it's not cooked. Maybe you just soak it and you eat it like that. So real austerity. But that means that some austerity has to be there, and after Grihastha life, that austerity takes place, which for us should be something. But ultimately, what does it mean? What's the essence of all of that? Well, that you've turned away from that family life, and now it means husband and wife, and you really concentrate on self-realization. So Srila Prabhupada didn't necessarily recommend that type of life. It's not available. There's not really any significant force around where you can do that. There's no fruit that you could live off of here. You just starve to death. So it's really a formula for suicide. But the essence is that at the age of 50, Pancha Urdvam Baram Najit, that yes, you should go at age 50. Then at age 50, we should actually be encouraging and enthusing, our youth, as of course all those who haven't taken brahmacharya or who are not taking brahmacharya life, who are going to be working, that you make your strategy. All right, you've got 25 to 50. At age 50, retire. I I was speaking in Hungary with one of our initiated devotees, and he was a very nice devotee, and he works. He's got a good employment with T-Mobile, which is the telephone company, communications company. And I asked him, "How old are you?" He said, 55. But we were talking because we're sort of just reviewing his life, and he was telling me that his 27-year-old daughter, who's married, is still living with him and dependent on him. And I said, "How old are you?" He says, "I'm 55. I said, "What's your daughter doing at 27? Why don't you throw her out of the house? Why is she dependent on you? Why isn't she maintaining you?" He says, "Well, you know how it goes." I said, "I know how it goes." I said, "But that's not the way it should be going. You got to rewrite the script." And I said, "By the way, what's your plan for retiring?" He's got houses, properties, he's well paid. He could retire early, even though obviously you got a reduced pension if he retired. And he's got income that would make sure that he'd be all right. I said, why are you working? Why don't you just retire and do full-time service? He's a very good preacher. He runs one of the counselor groups. He preaches. He's very. He says, "Retire?" I never thought of that. He said, "What would my company think?" I said, "Who cares what your company thinks? So what does Krishna think? But what would T-Mobile do without me?" I said, "I got a feeling T-Mobile can do very well without you." He said, "They're not dependent on you. This is like a global company." It was like shock, he was in shock. "I'll retire, but what, I'm not working." So Prabhupada here says, you should be ashamed. When I go back, I'm going to cite this, I say, you should be ashamed of yourself. I got in his case, but at least here I have a quote from Prabhupada. He says, yeah, you should be ashamed of yourself. So why? Because it becomes a sort of attachment. It becomes like, you could almost say Nishkam Bhakti Yoga, is that someone's detached. Yeah, I'll give all my donation, but I'm just so attached and I'm fixed to this work. I'm still attached to working because it gives me a sense of identity. But here Prabhupada says, no, now you should give up that identity. Your identity shouldn't be to your job. Your identity should be to self-realization, because that work really gives you a sense of entitlement, a sense of belonging, a sense of identity, especially if you're executive with T-Mobile, you're really looked up to. And now what will I be? You'll be a nobody. You'll just be a Krishna Das. And you come to the temple and you do full-time service and you preach, or you sit in the reception and you greet the guests. You sit in front of, in the temple room, you sit in front of Gokulananda and you preach to the guests that come in and you offer them Charanamrita. Just like often you see devotees in temples in India, some old man is sitting by the Charanamrita and that's all he does. He just gives people Charanamrita. It's very, very nice service. And you can preach in the meantime, and you do that, and you maintain yourself. And that's Vanaprastha. Fine, I haven't gone off to that forest, but effectively the essence of that should be there. So when here Srila Prabhupada is saying we should be very much ashamed, it means that we need to move on. We shouldn't get stuck, but rather we follow the proper system that Prabhupada is outlining here. If someone doesn't stay in Brahmacharya ashram and they're moving in Grihastha ashram, but Grihastha ashram isn't a permanent thing. It's not when you're 50 years old, you've become a babysitter for grandchildren, and then that you start reliving life in that way, not reliving my children's life, now I relive my grandchildren's life, and I go through the same phenomenon. But no, concentrating, because it's serious business. Devotees who've been around for a while recognize that becoming Krishna consciousness, it's not like just falling off a tree. It's really hard work, and it's full-time work. And it's full-time work. And if someone is fortunate enough, and of course that requires a certain amount of strategic planning. Fine, I got 25 years, somehow or another, I'm going to manage life well. I have to manage my life in such a way that by age 50 I can retire. Now, You may not be able to live in Letchmore Heath and retire at age 50, but that's all right. You can live in Watford. Houses are a lot cheaper, mortgages a lot cheaper. You can pay off your mortgage. So don't compete. Don't try and... In other words, if that is how we actually plan the future, and often when I'm talking to young devotees who are just sort of starting out, then make sure that you actually know what the goal is in mind. What is it that we're trying to achieve in this Grihastha life? We're not trying to achieve big bank balance or a big house or trying to compete with others. According to their nature, everyone's going to be able to have a certain amount of income. Based on that income, ideally it would be good if you could be giving 50% to spread Krishna consciousness, but if not 50, then at least 10. And then whatever your means of livelihood, then just figure out that by the time I'm 50, I've got not only the house that I live in paid off, but maybe you've got another little apartment or two that you can rent out, and you can live off that, and that's it. And then you knock on Shrudi's door and you say, here I am, tell me what to do. And at 50 years old, there's still some gas in the tank. If you wait till 65, you're running on empty. There's nothing left. So it doesn't work when you're 70 years old and you become like a real handicap. Just have people sitting in wheelchairs in the reception room and trying to stay awake. But at 50, you can really be quite constructive, quite energetic, go out, do things. You could even, Dhananjaya Prabhu is still selling books. So you can still be out on the street if you want to relive your youth, the good days of your youth. So here Prabhupada is saying, do we believe that this is what actually we should be doing? And that whether it's, I don't know whether it's IBM or one of those unmentionable banks down in central London, or who knows, T-Mobile, whoever we're working for, that at a certain point they can do without us, and self-realization and service to Krishna are the main things that we need to concentrate on. And if we do, then following Maharaj Yati's example and Srila Prabhupada's prediction that in one lifetime we can go back home, back to Godhead. But it does require planning. It just doesn't happen by accident. It really requires a plan, and that's what human form of life is all about. We're given this Tadami Buddhi, we're given a special God-given intelligence, and we can make that use that intelligence to determine how we're going to get from A to B, wherever we are right now, and how we're actually going to navigate through life in order to go back home, back to Godhead. And we try to avoid the type of fallacious lifestyle that King Yati fell into because he was in Maya, and not go that track, because sometimes the idea is, well, it's all right, I'll just practice Krishna consciousness later on. I can tell you from being in later on that it's not so easy to practice Krishna consciousness at this stage. It becomes much, much more difficult. So, Komarat Achura Pragya, yes, Maharaj says now when you're young, now's a good time, now's the best time. And keeping a very dharmic or Krishna conscious lifestyle throughout life, ultimately we can come to that stage where we've really achieved that purity of heart which allows us to go back home, back to Godhead. Otherwise it won't happen just by accident. So I'll stop there. If any respected Vaishnavas have any comments.